Alex Whittingham, Head of Training at Bristol Ground School. Thanks for joining us today. Give us a, I realise this is a tough question, but give us a primer. What is ground school?
Ground school. Ground school is studying the theory that you need to pass the exams, the written exams, to become a professional pilot.
Okay, and how is that, what are the differences in the ways that can be delivered?
Well, there's quite a lot of material, and the two classical ways of delivering it are either to sit in a classroom for what is typically 6 or 7 months and learn the whole thing beginning to end. The alternative is to take a remote learning class, a distance learning class, and do it in a slightly longer time.
And by slightly longer, what do you mean?
Well, it kind of varies. I mean, if you're doing remote learning, one of the advantages of remote learning is you can work at your own pace, and it is perfectly possible to complete all the exams within 6 or 7 minutes. To complete all the exams within 6 or 7 months. But the people that take distance learning courses are usually doing this learning in amongst all the other parts of their life. They have a job, they have a family and stuff like that. So it's more common to stretch it out over maybe a year, year and a half, sometimes even a little bit more. But if you said 12 to 14 months, you'd probably be about right on average.
How many subjects are there these days?
So there are 13 subjects in the HPLs, some of them big ones and some of them small ones.
And do they get taken all? Do you like study everything and then go and take 13 exams, or do you break it up into groups?
It's quite unusual to do that because of the amount of information that you have to retain. Some European states do require that, but most allow you to take the exams in groups. So what we tend to do is to group the subjects together where they complement each other and put them in a module. So you'll have maybe 3 modules of training. That's the most usual thing, with 3 or 4 exams in each module.
And presumably you have to pay the CEA to take these exams?
Yeah, you have to pay the CEA to take these exams, or whichever authority you get tested with. So yeah, it's a significant amount of money. It's probably in excess of £1,000 or so for a full set of exams.
And that's in addition to the course fees?
In addition to the course fees, yeah. So the course fees vary quite a lot. Bottom end is around about £2,000, top end is about £5,000. And onto that, you'd probably have to add on at least £1,000 or so of exam fees.
So not insignificant, but in the scale of things, one of the lower cost items in the route to becoming a professional pilot.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds significant, but when you compare it to the cost of hiring a twin aircraft for instrument rating training, it pales into insignificance. So it's something that takes place over a longer period of time. But yeah, you have to budget for it, certainly.
So if you're coming to this and you're not a kind of 18, 19, 20-year-old brain absorbing everything like a sponge, used to learning, maybe you're a career changer in your 30s or even 40s, and you haven't done any sort of academic learning for a while, I'm assuming that's a bit more of a challenge potentially, but how many should you be unlucky and not pass, how many goes do you get?
You get 6 exam sittings, and each exam you can attempt 4 times, and if you muff it on the 6th setting or the 4th attempt, then you have to go back to the start and take the whole group of exams again. But to be honest, that's quite rare. It's an intimidating thing at the start, and particularly for people who haven't done learning for a long time, they're often quite nervous when they first pick up the training material. But the reality is that people can cope with it perfectly well, and remote learning has come on a long way in the last 20 or 30 years.
And is it mainly delivered in, do people get delivered a whole case full of books, or is it an iPad these days? Or
fundamentally, it's an iPad these days. I mean, you can still get books, and there's a strong case for books in some areas, because people do actually retain material better from the printed word. But the modern reality is that everybody works off iPads. And you get presented with whichever course you take, you'll get the course material in an app or some sort of learning management system that works on an iPad or a PC or a Mac, whatever.
And there are presumably mock tests that you can take to gauge how you're doing?
Absolutely, yeah. Well, the principle that most of us apply is train, test, train, test, train, test. So if you have a decent course, then there will be tests appearing at regular intervals to consolidate what you've learned and get you prepared for the sort of questions that come up in exams.
Okay, so to sum up and make it super simplistic, if the 6 months in a classroom before you fly an aircraft, that tends to be part of an integrated course?
Yes, it does. It suits the integrated courses to work it that way. because they can do the ground training usually in Europe, and they have 6, 7, 8 months or so of ground training, probably never seen an aircraft. And then the next phase would be a visual flying phase where they quite often go overseas, take them out to America, Spain, somewhere like that, and fly out there.
And so by the time they do see an aircraft, they, in theory, will have their 13 passes.
Oh yes, yeah, absolutely, because the schedules of the course demand it, that you have to have the ground school finished in that particular case before you start flying.
And if you go for the distance learning version, where you receive your files via iPad or your books or whatever, is there any instructor time whatsoever in that?
There is instructor time in that. There has to be. That the rules require 10% of the course time must be spent, what they refer to as in the classroom. And for a distance learning student, a modular student, that means 65 hours. So that equates to probably about 2 weeks. But the reality, again, is that 2 weeks probably isn't enough. And most schools will build in at least 3 weeks of revision time just before the exams, where you attend either a physical class, or you can do it online, or you can have hybrid classes where half the class is online and half the class is in the classroom.
Okay. So you mentioned Europe a couple of times there. Obviously, since Brexit, there is no one EASA license. There's an EASA license for Europe, effectively, and a UK CA license for the UK. What do most people do when it comes to ground school? Do they try and do both? Or?
Well, if you're doing an integrated course, it's up to the school to decide what you're going to do. But most people who are doing modular courses take the advice and do 2 licenses in parallel, which is really quite easy to do, although it does involve a little bit of extra effort and a little bit of extra expense.
Those 13 subjects, does that mean you end up taking 26 exams, or is there a way that you can?
It means exactly that. There are some times that you can get a flying school or an ATO that has dual approvals. So for the flying courses, for instance, you can find an ATO, usually in the UK, that is approved by both the UK CAA and by EASA. So you can do 1 course and get 2 ticks. And likewise, you can do 1 flying test and get 2 ticks. But that doesn't work for ground school. In the ground exams, you've got to do 2 sets of separate exams. So you do 1 ground school course with a provider that's dual approved, and then you take a set of CAA exams, and you take a set of EASA exams in parallel.
And end up with 2 licenses?
Yeah, it's a little bit more complicated than that. You actually need 2 medicals when you start, but there are organisations that will give you an EASA and a CAA medical for a few £100 extra. Again, mostly based in the UK. You need to do 2 sets of ground exams, and you need to be careful as you go through that you choose ATOs that have dual approval and can offer some form of testing where you get minimal or no extra expense.
Okay. We've spoken a little bit about integrated and modular, and that's kind of a question that many people have had on their mind since, well, for about the last 30 years that I've been involved with the industry, really, although it was called something different back then, I think. Give us a quick rundown of the pros and cons of each.
So integrated schools are schools that provide their training under the aegis of one organisation all the way through. They are absolutely perfect for somebody who's coming out of school and would be very happy going from one sort of semi-institution to another. Everything's absolutely done for you, and they will take you right from the very beginning. I've never seen an aeroplane before in my life. They take you through ground school, do all the training. At the end of it, you get a license. It's a very profitable industry when it's running well, and they market those courses extremely well. And there are advantages. I mean, it's perfect for, as I said, for a youngster, and they, in some cases, they do have tag schemes where airlines will nominate candidates before they start training and say, provided this guy doesn't mess up or this lady doesn't mess up, then at the end of it, we'll give them an interview. Downside is cost. They are nearly twice as expensive as the other routes that are available. So you're paying for a service for an integrated school. Modular courses are courses where you do a series of of courses at different flight schools. Each of them are specialist in their own particular area. So you do a private pilot's license at a local flying school, you do ground training with a ground training provider, you go to a professional flight school to do your professional flying courses. So a series of different modules. And the big advantages of those are cost, as I said before, typically just over half what you would pay at the top-end integrated schools, and flexibility. And for many people that come to flying in midlife, in their 20s and 30s, they need the flexibility because they can't decamp from their job, their family, their responsibilities for a year and a half or so and go into Arizona to learn to fly. They need to fit it in around their lives. So it takes a little bit longer. It doesn't have to, but it classically does take a little bit longer. Costs an awful lot less, and there is flexibility in the system.
Talking about flexibility, does that mean that you don't have to do the modules as soon as you finish one, you have to start the other? You can have a gap between them and earn some money to pay for the next one?
Exactly that. And you can earn as you work. I mean, there are times when you have to perhaps dedicate a month or 2 months to your flying as you get towards the end of the licensing thing. And that, if you're employed, requires a bit of a conversation with your employer, maybe take leave of absence or something like that. But yeah, you don't have to go straight from one course to the other. You can take time out, and if you decide at any point that it's getting a bit much for you, then you can basically pause or indeed stop. So you'll have a PPL. As soon as you get your PPL, it's yours, it's in your pocket, and no one's going to take that away from you. So if you say, well, at this point I need to pause for a couple of years, pause for a couple of years. It works.
Great. Alex, thank you very much.